ask you personally, like, how do you identify yourself? And obviously, you know, like there are different parts of our identity or different aspects of these identities. And so how do these aspects sort of play out together in what you do and how you interact with people?
Okay, so that's a very comprehensive question. So like a check, like kind of like a fill in the blank, fill in a application question. My identity. I mean, I'm Korean American and I'm female. But to like go deeper, because you're kind of talking about, I don't think I actually don't, because some of these questions, like you asked, who is your community and how does your identity play out in your life? Mm-hmm. Those are really deep questions, you know? Like,
no,
I'm like,
I totally
wow.
understand.
Like, yeah, I was like, wow, I need to, because I identify with being Korean American and a female in some ways, but in other ways, I am not too tied to my, because like a lot of people they live kind of like transient or transplant lives, right? So I grew up in Houston, Texas, with not that many Asian Americans, not that many Asian people. My school, our family was the first Asian. But then when I moved to California for college, there was a lot of Asian people when I went to Stanford, and there's like 20% of the campus, or of the undergrad campus, is 22, I think, is Asian. So, I definitely, in terms of culture, in terms of food, in terms of family, in terms of education, I very much identify with Asian Americans. But in other ways, I don't. I'm very American in the sense that I believe in individualism and independence and having your own independent thought. I'm not a very collective. So, but those are still just stereotypes of the Asian culture, right? Yeah. But sometimes I feel very much at odds with the way other Asian Americans think. One big one as an entrepreneur is failure. It's a shame-based culture. So in order to be entrepreneurial, you can't be afraid of making a mistake. Mm-hmm. You know, you can't be afraid of doing something new and just falling flat on your face. And that's one thing that's been very difficult to me as an Asian American. The biggest people who were not my advocates were Asian American. You know, and also Asian American, I would say, elites, like people who work, you know, people who went to the Ivy Leagues and who have masters and PhDs. So I was trying to answer that question, but then at the same time, I very much identify with the family, importance of education, you know, things like that.
Yeah,
being humble, right? So you're Asian, so you kind of understand those qualities, but then there's others. Every culture has, like, I would say, the good qualities and the bad qualities, right? And where American culture, I feel like, is very different, or maybe Caucasian American culture, is that you can kind of have your own voice, and it's praised. It's actually it's really encouraged to have independent thought. I've noticed that with a lot of my Caucasian friends in California. So in Texas, it's a little different. That's what's so awesome about America. It has different microcultures all over, depending on where you are. I know I live in this utopian Los Angeles in the Bay Area where it's extremely open-minded. But I feel like being a woman, more than anything, has kind of my background was working in media, and I think more than anything, being a woman kind of superseded the Asian woman thing. It was more like women were. I mean, you see with the whole Me Too movement, like that movement. I dealt with my whole professional career, not just the sexual harassment and things like that, but that's kind of just one part of oppression of women and not appreciating women's contribution.
Yeah.
It's manifested obviously in sexual harassment because they just think of it, oh, we're just there to please men. But that actually translates way more than just sex. It's or sexual harassment. That's also our opinions, our contributions, in all kind of under one bucket. So, the first, like, the about your community question, I was like, oh, I don't know how I'm going to answer these, because, like, this is like, you know, we grab coffee and we talk for 2 hours. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's,
yeah, no, I totally understand. Yeah, honestly, as we were crafting these questions as well, I would have thought the same thing. I'd be like, how do I even answer this sort of a question, you know? Because it's like you said, I mean, like, on the one hand, I would say, like, for example, I'm Filipino, so I relate to Filipinos. But at the same time, it's really odd because I don't look like a typical Filipino. Like, I usually get comments as I look Japanese or Chinese or Korean or something. And so, especially when I'm abroad, so, like, it was the same in Italy and the same here in the U.S., if I see a Filipino, I can tell they're Filipino, but they can't tell I'm Filipino. And so sometimes they're going to completely pass me by, like, I don't register to them because I don't look Filipino. And sometimes it's a good thing, and sometimes it's a bad thing, you know? So, like, on the one hand, I want to, like, expand my horizon. You know, like, I came to the U.S., I stepped out of my country and stepped out of my comfort zone in order to meet more people. But at the same time, it's just, like, how do I, like, hang out with people supposedly from my country, you know? Like, I'm not really, like, getting to interact with them. So that's a weird, I think it's weird. And sort of the whole idea of community evolves in, like, on the situation and where you are. And
oh, yeah. Like, it's so funny how you say you're Filipino, but you actually look more like Korean, Chinese, or Japanese. I'm Korean, but I actually look more Filipino.
Really?
Yeah, so when I used to work in film financing, I had to travel to China, Hong Kong, and this is where I realized the Asian on Asian racism. Yes. So I was in Hong Kong, and I was hanging out with a Stanford alumni, and a lot of the expats who come to American colleges, they're pretty big shots. Like, whereas, like, me, we're like immigrant kids. But, like, so I'm hanging out with my friend, and she's like a socialite in Hong Kong, and we're hanging out with all these, like, very privileged kids who all went to, like, Ivy League schools, and they thought I was Filipino, and then, so for, like, an hour, they didn't talk to me. There's, like, major racism towards Filipinos in Hong Kong. Yeah, it's so weird. I like, we're all Asian here. Like, I mean, I get, like, when white people are like, I don't understand. And so, and then one of the music producers, one of my friends who's a music producer, all the artists are way, like, more tolerant, in my opinion, like, talked to me, and I was like, hey, and then I was like, how come, you know, none of Elizabeth's friends are talking to me at this party? And she's like, and he told me, he says, well, they think we're Filipino. And I was just like, what, so? Like, why does that matter? And supposedly a lot of the maids are Filipino, like, right? In Hong Kong.
Yes,
and a major hierarchy of Asian races. And for somebody who comes from America, where all Asians, we just kind of band together, like, as a minority, it was so weird to see that racism, like, Asian on Asian racism. You know, so I totally get, like, it's so weird. It depends where you are, right, and your community and your identity. And anyways, we could talk about that all day long. But I was looking at your question, and in terms of, like, what are your priorities for social change in your community? And so I was trying to figure out who my community is, and I actually, and for me, I would think, well, what cause do I care about the most? It would probably be not just Asians, Asian Americans, but it's all mostly underrepresented. I'm very passionate about underrepresented minorities and women in high-powered positions and in industries that affect that have a lot of influence. So that includes politics, technology, media, and entertainment. That has kind of been the thing that's kind of been constant in my whole career. I moved to Hollywood because I didn't see enough people like me in front of the, you know, like, stories told. And I said, how are we going to change stereotypes of Asian Americans unless our stories are told in a more three-dimensional, you know, in a more diverse way? And honestly, it has changed. Hollywood has changed. We have we have other things. It's definitely not there yet. But when I was working in in Hollywood, it evolved to not just Asian American voices, but to all Hispanic, you know, LGBT, you know, African American, everybody. And that's kind of been kind of the common thread in everything that I've been doing since, you know, graduating from college, is to uplift and to amplify the perspectives and voices of underrepresented people in media. Yeah. So I think that's my community, I guess, because because you know, like you, I'm from Texas, but then I went to Stanford, then I lived in Spain, then I moved to LA. You know, like we kind of live these transplant lives, we kind of live these transient lives, you know. So it's not like I was raised in this, you know, in the East LA community, and that's my people. Like I'm a little, it's not. That's my community. I think is other people who want to see more of a diverse voices and opinions in influence.
No, I think that's perfectly fair. I think that was a great answer. I'm glad you were able to like come to that after like thinking about it for a while. Actually, so from there, because I'd also read about your work with Gladio, how does that play into it? I mean, like, how did you even come to think of Gladio, and did that play into it?
Yeah, so I would say more than 10 years ago, I think it was 2005, or maybe no, 2000. I was a little later when I started doing this work. I started volunteering with organizations in Los Angeles that were helping underserved kids with college planning. So it was helping them with like their FAFSA, which is like the financial aid form, or helping them, you know, write their essay, or how to choose, basically all things college planning. And that kind of morphed into volunteering at like inner city schools, or in more of that kind of evolved to career planning in the state of California, and I think actually a lot of the states. They have found that, you know, you really need to introduce careers early on in middle school and high school, especially to the underserved. You can't just talk about college, because they need to know the why. They need to know, why are we going to college? Why are we studying? You know, because it's not a given for them. So career technical information, career education is a huge push in California. And so I started mentoring kids in inner city schools, and also speaking at career days, and then also sitting on in California they have these things called career pathways, and I started sitting on the advisory boards, and I just tried to get my friends to go and, you know, come out and volunteer. It was so difficult for me to get my friends to volunteer if it wasn't like a 10, 15, 20-minute drive, you know. And the thing about, like, just geography-wise is, you know, the poor and more low-income schools are farther away from, like, in LA, it's like the west side is where all, like, the privileged, you know, like Santa Monica or something, you know. But like, you know, East LA, South LA, Boyle Heights, Lincoln Heights, those areas are about an hour, and you know, LA traffic is crazy. So it just takes so much longer to go there to volunteer. And the thing is, if you want to volunteer in schools, you have to do it within the school day, right? Because the kids go home, and schools don't have funding to be able to like have the teachers stay until 6:30 or 7 p.m. Right? Like, so it's always like all the career and college stuff, volunteer stuff, inspiration always happens during the day. And so that also makes it very hard for career professionals to come and mentor or do career day speeches and stuff like that. And I just felt that was like really unfair, that like, just because you went to a school that was kind of far away or not as resourced, that you didn't get to be exposed to the variety of careers in such an amazing place as LA. LA has every industry, from tech to media entertainment to healthcare to skill trade. I mean, we have everything here. And I just felt like it was so unfair. And if you look at the people who attend career days in the underserved schools, it's always the same 3 or 4 people. There's always a police officer. There's always someone like EMT or nurse and teacher. And I always tell people, do you think that's a coincidence that those 3 industries they don't lack diversity? Police officers are as diverse as you get. You've got African Americans, Hispanic, women, you know, you've got everything. Asian people, everything. But and I said that's because those kids are exposed to those careers, not just in the career days, but also on TV, like all the cop shows and the you know, and like in the ER and stuff, you know, like And so I just felt like they don't know about all these emerging careers. They don't know about careers in tech. They don't know about careers in digital media. They don't know about careers in politics. I mean, and so I felt like I kept seeing that over and over again for many, many years. And I was just like, wouldn't it be great? And as a person who's worked in film, I was like, wouldn't it be great if there was an online platform that tells the stories of people of color working in a variety of industries and then giving them the tools and resources to pursue those careers? And that's where me and my co-founder, we were like, we got to make that, you know? And so then we started, but that's how we started Gladio. And that was like 3 years ago. We were like, we just got to do it because I volunteered at over 50 schools, and every single one of them, they didn't have career education. It was all career readiness. It's basically like teaching a kid how to do an interview or like how to write a resume. But what are the careers? They're like two different. There's career readiness, which is like preparing them for like the soft skills, like, you know, how to like dress for an interview and how to. But they don't. But the counselors and teachers are not equipped with the resources that actually expose kids to a variety of careers. And if you really think about it, it's like, I always say, how do these kids aspire to careers they've never heard of?
Yeah.
And I really feel like that's where we believe we can contribute to the diversity problem in a variety of industries, namely tech, media and entertainment, politics. Some of the other industries are much more diverse, right? But I feel like there's a handful of them that really lack women and minorities in their employee base and positions of leadership.
That's actually,
so that's kind of the inspiration.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I was just thinking about it, and you know what you were saying, for example, that it's not fair that like kids don't get these opportunities just because they're far away, and I just. Like, coming from a country like the Philippines, for example, I know that we have, like, rural schools where kids have to travel on foot for, like, 2 hours just to get to a school. And I'm like, I didn't even think about, like, yeah, so what sort of careers... I mean, you know, like, at this point, I guess we're just focused on giving them an education, but not exactly preparing them for, like, life after that education, you know? And so I just like I just think that's really fascinating, and I have not thought about it before, and I'm so glad that you thought about it because like that's amazing.
Thank you.
So when you started, what were like the biggest challenges that you had? I mean, you already had the experience in media, but was there anything particularly difficult about starting it?
Well, so if I had started it when we're talking about social entrepreneurship, I can only really speak to social entrepreneurship as a nonprofit. It's very different for if you are like a B Corp. Are you familiar with like the other other legal structures of social cause?
I don't know them by name or by number.
Okay. Well, there's like this whole movement, and probably a lot of the Ashoka Fellows are not just nonprofits, they're like social enterprises, B Corps. So, unfortunately, the niche that we were doing, it's very hard to be a for-profit with a social mission. I'm just going to call them B Corps, because we are offering a free platform to kids, and it's not like we're making a shoe or a book where we can charge people. You know, we're trying to the whole point is to give access to kids who wouldn't otherwise have it because they either, you know, they go to a school that's very, 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 you know, very unresourced. You know, most schools don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars to pay for a platform of career education, right? So the whole point was to actually, you know, get rid of the gap between the rich and the poor. So we were like, okay, well, that's the whole point. So we can't charge a school district to use the platform. Which if you can charge, I think you could be a for-profit with a social mission, but that actually didn't serve our mission. So we had to be a nonprofit for two reasons. One, if you're a for-profit, it makes it very difficult for you to work with public schools. Not hard to work with charter schools, but very difficult to work with public schools, mainly because it's much more political and bureaucratic, but also because, you they don't have the staff to vet the for-profit to make sure it's protecting the kids. Because, when you're a nonprofit, you're bound by, like, your bylaws, your IRS regulations to make sure you're mission-driven. Mm-hmm. It's not to say some nonprofits are bad and they do bad things. Like, I'm not saying that. But there's another level of, I guess, accountability. Okay. When you're a nonprofit, you have to be mission-driven. That is your number one kind of, like, you serve that God, like, you don't serve profit, Mm-hmm. And so for us, we had to be in the public school system. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, we're just giving all of our resources, we're just going to be like, all the privileged kids get it, and then we're just going to widen the gap even further, right? So we had to be. The minute I got my 501c3, any school would utilize our programs, let me go in there, do, career workshops. I didn't even have to sign anything. It was just like, okay, we trust you, right? So I was like, oh, I got to be a nonprofit. Number two, so I'm going to talk a little tech speak. B2C is business to consumer. So, like, business is like our organization. Consumer is the end user. So a lot of B2C companies, like, let's say Facebook is a B2C company, right? Like, where we don't have to pay for Facebook, right? Yeah. But they make a ton of money because they sell our attention to advertisers, right? Mm-hmm. Well, the problem with so at first we were thinking, oh, maybe we can be a for-profit with a social mission, but we would never want to charge kids or schools, so we have to make some money somehow. Yeah. So I started meeting with investors, and they said, well, you have to a subscriber list. So we made a login, and they had to subscribe, and we had many kids, like 150 kids signing up a day to take the career quiz and everything like that, and they wanted me to sell the kids' information to colleges. Now, if it was an opt-in, all right, which actually that's how College Board makes money. I don't know if you didn't take the SAT. You probably took something. Did you take the SAT?
No, I took the GRE though.
You took the GRE. Yeah. Okay, so College Board's GRE. So when you take the College Board is a nonprofit. If you take it, then they sell your information to colleges. But the thing is, the College Board actually sells it to credible universities like public schools, and they're not like for-profit colleges. The thing is, the College Board kind of has that. They're like, I don't want to say that they're like a monopoly, but they do that. The other websites that are out there that are free for kids, they sell their kids. They sell the information, or they lead gen. They call it lead generation to for-profit online schools like University of Phoenix, DeVry, those types of schools. And if you know anything about them, I mean, a lot of them are scams, right? Like, and so my investors were like, when we were meeting with the investors, they were like, you need to sell your student leads to these colleges because they pay $30 a lead. Whereas like if you want to contrast that to like UCLA or Stanford, they pay 30 cents a lead. So it's like so much of a difference, right, of profit. So that's another reason why we became a nonprofit, because I don't even, let's say I die tomorrow and somebody inherits Gladi, I'm like, I don't want them to ever sell all of these kids, especially the kids that we're targeting are like underprivileged kids. I don't want them to sell the information to like University of Phoenix, and then they go to like that college and they don't even graduate because they don't even, like, they can't even get a job afterwards. A lot of these schools are like, you've never even heard of them. And it's like this, it's even less education quality than like community colleges, right? Which community colleges are like 1/10 of the price. So that's why we're a nonprofit. Okay, so that's what I'm telling you. So my experience, I just wanted to tell you that because I think it's very difficult, the challenges of a nonprofit entrepreneur than a for-profit social entrepreneur. I think they're different worlds because the money is different. Yeah. Social entrepreneurs can actually pitch to an angel investor, right? Be like, here, we want to do this. This is our KPIs. I need a 2-year runway. Give me money, and I'm going to do that. Nonprofit world, there's no investors. So the biggest challenge above everything, in my opinion, is access to capital. Yeah. And this is where being a woman of color, even though I think I'm very privileged and I went to a very good school, if you don't have wealthy, I guess, patrons or benefactors, what they call benefactors, a lot of the new nonprofits, like the ones that start, they haven't been around for 30 years, usually it's a wealthy patron that partners. Like, she's probably the head of the board. She's probably also on the board of some museum, and married to a multi-millionaire. I've noticed that. I don't know about other places, but definitely in New York and LA, it's like this. It's like maybe even DC. So, like, for me, I didn't have that because as a child of an immigrant, I don't have. My parents don't know anybody. They're immigrants. You know, they
Fair.
My mom was a doctor, but she passed away when I was young. But I moved to LA. I'm the first generation to live in LA. I don't have those connections, so it's very difficult for me so I had to raise the money. Luckily, there's crowdfunding and friends and family. So we were able to raise the money to be able to create. So the prototype of the platform we created, me and my sister just funded. Like we were like, you know what? It's not that expensive. Like $30,000. We'll fund it ourselves. Then we implemented it with over 100 volunteers. I just got a ton of volunteers to interview and help me write, make some of the graphics. And then we brought it out there. But the hardest part still is the funding in the nonprofit model. And I find that a lot of the more innovative nonprofits in Los Angeles, because we're so tech-based and content-based, a lot of the traditional foundations, they don't understand what we do. They're like, because they're more used to an offline program, like a mentorship program or like a 6-week teaching curriculum. They're not used to some tech platform, right? So that has been my most difficult thing, but I kind of figured it out. You have to partner with a more established agency or either government or nonprofit, and then you can approach a foundation. So I figured it out how to do it, but it took me 8 months to figure that out, because I was like, how come I'm getting rejected from every foundation grant? And it's also because, do you know how the old boys club in corporate America, the old white boys club? Well, in the nonprofit world, it's the older white women's over 40 club. They all it's actually, that's why when you said in Ashoka there's a lot of white males. I think that's because it's you're including for-profit social enterprises, right?
Probably.
Because in the nonprofit world, it's very women. It's like women everywhere, But it's white women who are usually well connected through their husbands, or just white women. And they're all kind of in their 40s or 50s. There's not that many who are younger. There's a ton of women of color who work for the founder and the executive director, but they're not the founder themselves or the executive director.
I see. That, I didn't know about any of that, so that is really fascinating to me.
I didn't either until about a year and a half ago either. I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to go into nonprofits where everything's equitable, unlike Hollywood. Nope, it's just a different game. It's the same. I mean, no sexual harassment, but it's the same, but it's just a different group of people who kind of hold the purse strings.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting is that, like you said, it's more than just a gender divide. I mean, it's really sort of it's that intersectionality, right? If you're a woman of color, it's not just the fact that you're a woman that sort of, I don't want to say it's a challenge, I guess, from that perspective. Yeah. So I guess you already mentioned some of them, but so you mentioned family helped you a lot to get you started. You said your sister helped you invest. Were there other people who you were able to go to for support? Did you know any other, I don't know, social entrepreneurs or other people, other women of color, other people in the media or tech worlds who helped you in some way?
Yeah, you kind of named a few of them. Definitely women of color who work in the nonprofit world who are executives. They've been huge advocates. And any person of color social entrepreneur, nonprofit founder. I know a lot of them in LA, and we kind of all try to help each other. African American man, Persian American woman, and a lot of them just, I don't know if this is a coincidence, but it's all of us are younger, under 40. I'm probably the oldest, but a ton of in their 20s, just passionate social activist people who are so passionate about social change, they have expressed the same frustrations that I just started encountering because I'm pretty new to the game compared to them. It's so hard for them to get access to donations and foundations. And they don't have the social networks who would give them the huge amounts of donations. I know this one. So actually, Ashoka and like Going Green and these fellowships have been very helpful to them. Because the traditional nonprofit fundraising. So my support network is pretty much other women of color executives and then just people of color founders and EDs in the nonprofit world. I do have some tech friends, but we are a tech but I'm not a tech person. Like, I'm not a programmer, and there's a little bit of a, how do I say, well, not in LA, but in the Bay Area, like, Gladio is not eligible for any of the nonprofit tech incubators because we do not have, I'm not a tech person, but I understand product development, and I project managed the development of our new platform, and I understand, but I'm not a programmer myself. So there is a little bit of I would say, that tech people want to work with tech people, if you know what I'm saying. Yeah. And because my background's in media, mostly storytelling and media, but I very much value tech, but digital media is not tech. It's tech because we're online, but it's not like we're creating an algorithm, It's like BuzzFeed. I mean, is that really a tech company? No, BuzzFeed is a content company. They just happen to be online, But like a lot of the times tech people are like, well, you're online, so the founder has to be a tech person. I'm like, but we're a content company. We create content. Yeah. We just happen to have some tech tools. So that's changing though, because digital media now is like a new thing. Like digital media, which is it's like a combination of digital and media. So I think it's changing. And in LA, I think people don't care as much because media is king in LA. It's all about content here. And I do have some alumni who can, steady givers, like people I went to college with. But the majority of the funds that we raised came through friends and family in LA and Texas. But that should be changing now that we've lined up a few pretty big partnerships with like the LA Chamber of Commerce, this County of LA's Art Commission. So I figured out how to kind of hack the whole we're new. We've only and by partnering with very established organizations and just kind of providing this innovative piece for them.
Yeah, no, that is amazing. So actually, that was a lot of what we were really trying to get at when we started this research is, you already mentioned it, it's how like tech people want to work with tech people. And we were looking at it and we realized, so a lot of your like the incubators or like those fellowship giving organizations, like they want to, like it also matters who is at the top of those sorts of organizations because they also want to fund people of the same type that they are.
Right.
That makes sense. So that was like one of the things that we were like, we'd done some research as well, just like background research before we started our interviews. And that was, I think, one of the fascinating things we realized, like, I mean, I can understand how difficult it would be if you have these sorts of people who are like, well, I only want to fund someone who I understand, who looks like me, works like me. I mean, so it's... Yeah.
But, Silicon Valley is another beast. Like, it's changing, though. Silicon Valley has been humbled ever since that whole, like, Facebook, basically Congress saying Facebook elected Trump. Or, like, helped Russia, like, ruin our democracy, So I think it's become definitely... Yeah, I think it's changed a lot. I think it's very humble. Like, one of the reasons, when we actually started Gladio in the Bay Area, and I had, and there's two reasons why we moved to LA. One is cheaper. LA people would be like, what? But it's so much cheaper to live here. So, when you start a nonprofit, like, I can't pay myself. So I had to move to a cheaper place. Number two, there's so much more of a diversity, and I'm not just saying racially in LA. The Bay Area, like, you can't, if you throw a rock into, like, a crowd, you'll meet a Stanford or Harvard grad. Like, literally, it's that common. Okay. And I went to Stanford, so I'm not trying to bash them, but it's just like, how can you do social change in a bubble? Like, you got to be with the people, real people. And LA is like, you go from neighborhood to neighborhood. Even though it is very privileged in LA, you've got East LA, South LA. It's a kind of a more of a melting pot. Bay Area, I feel like, just because of the way, the geography with that bay in the middle, and they can't build and all the preserves and stuff, like, the more, like, middle-class people are so pushed out to the east. Like, and so, and also, the Bay Area says, you know, their motto is, you know, change the world, we're changing the world. But, like, sometimes they don't admit, well, maybe it's just they just want to make money. You know, like, I mean, just admit it. You know, in Hollywood, people, nobody says, oh, I want to change the world. But they're like, I want to be rich, right? Like, it's kind of honest. So they do a lot of, like, philanthropic work on the side. They volunteer, they donate money. But when I was in the Bay Area, like, I had so much richer friends in the Bay Area, nobody would even donate. And because they believe they're changing the world by making some app, right? Even though it's like a for-profit and they want to exit and sell to Google for $500 million. Like, but I just kept, everyone's like, oh, change the world. And I'm like, how is that app changing the world? It's just like delivering food or something. Like, that's not changing the world. Like, I mean, so I had to move to LA because I just felt like people knew that sometimes their job was their job to make a living, and then they also did volunteer work and philanthropic work. It was separate a lot of the time, and they accepted that, you know. But in the Bay Area, I feel like they want their job to be mixed, but they also want to exit and sell their company. So it was very hard to have that conversation. But one good thing good about Silicon Valley is they're not afraid to try things out. Right? Like, make a mistake. And they obviously, I don't have to, like, it's hard for me to sell to older people the digital platform of what we do. In the Bay Area, that wouldn't even be like a why. Like, they get it. Okay, yes, scalable. You make one career video and then a million people use it instead of, like, having, like, they get it. So I kind of miss that about the Bay Area, but LA's changing it. It's getting there now. It's definitely evolving.
So I guess on that note, would you say that there are a lot of, because I mean, you mentioned that you started in the Bay Area, but do you see a lot of people like starting sort of the nonprofit work or social entrepreneur activities within LA?
I do. I see people starting things, but not that many. It's not built. There's not as many incubators and fellowships like they have in the Bay Area. It's very ingrained. Entrepreneurism is so very ingrained into the Bay Area culture. Here, especially the people who I feel like are so, they know the community way better than even me. They just don't have the resources. It's like they're trying to survive, you know. So I know a few founders in their 20s. They're super passionate, and they founded a nonprofit organization. And a lot of them, you know, they might have to either close shop after a few years or just to pay the bills because it's very hard for them to get funding.
Yeah.
You know, I feel a little more lucky because I'm older. Like, I'm not in my 20s, I'm in my late 30s, so I've saved money. You know, like, I also consult on the side for, like, you know, digital media stuff. Also own, you know, real estate. I'm, like, older, right? So I could take off a year with no pay to do this, you know, and so I'm not actually on the privileged side. But I find some of the other people, and this is what I've seen, this is so that I can be frank. So I have a couple of nonprofit founders. Both of them are one is a African American male and one is a Persian American woman, and they both have told me that their board won't approve a higher salary for them after they've been pretty much kicking butt. I mean, they're like Forbes 30 under 30. I mean, like their outcomes are really great, and their board is mostly wealthy or like white men and women, and they're just like, I can't live off of $50,000 for, you know, like, I've been doing this work for 5 years. I have a lot of traction. Like, she even met President Obama. Like, it was just crazy. And she was telling me she can't get a raise. So, you know, she's probably going to leave the social entrepreneur space, go to business school.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's what she told me she was going to do. Because you can't, because LA's not like super cheap, you know,
Yeah.
it's not like Texas or something. So I feel like because of the financial instability,
Mm-hmm.
A lot of really great, passionate, smart people are going to leave the social entrepreneurship world because they have such difficulty accessing capital. And so they're going to take what they did, go to like get into a really good business school, and then maybe do something else that makes more money. I've noticed that, and they're the ones who are like, when I'm so impressed with them. They're like they're like 27, 28. And like what they've done is so amazing. And then but they say, you know, my 4-year plan is to get out of here because there's no way I can make a living and survive in this city.
Yeah.
That's what they told me. And I was just like, oh my gosh. I'm a little different because I'm older, and so I'm on like the more I'm like mid-career, not the beginning of my career, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So, what would you recommend as advice maybe to like communities or to organizations like Ashoka, for example, and like how they can help these sorts of people, you know, hopefully not leave the social entrepreneurship stage or world?
Well, I think if you create the model that the for-profit world does, like they have, so venture capitalists,
Mm-hmm.
They're not just money people. They also are your board members. Like if you're starting an app or something and you get money from like whatever, Kleiner Perkins or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like they not only give you money, they give you mentorship, guidance, connections, legal help. You know, there's a really because they want to safeguard their investment. I mean, they have invested. Obviously, it's not out of it. They want to make sure you do well because they gave you money, right?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the foundations try to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Like ideally, the foundations try to do that, but foundations are not built to give money to social entrepreneurs. And like that kind of leads me when you asked what does the term social entrepreneur mean?
Yeah.
And it's different in my opinion than nonprofit founder,
Mm-hmm.
because it's really creating sustainable change on a large scale, right? That's really like it's. I looked it up because I was like, oh, that's interesting. She's going to ask me that question. I'm like, I'm a social entrepreneur, and I'm like, but like in Silicon Valley, you're not an entrepreneur if you're doing a service-based company. That's what they say.
Huh.
Like if like let's say you're like a consulting company, like that's not an entrepreneur. That's what they say. They say entrepreneur is somebody who creates a scalable business. And so I think the social entrepreneur, like Wikipedia, is like a visionary who's creating sustainable social change on a larger scale. Foundations are not built for that. Like they say they want sustainability and scalability,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not funding that. They're not. I mean, maybe Bill and Melinda Gates, maybe these larger national organizations are, probably the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative will, but like if the foundations were doing that, because the foundations actually do give you that kind of venture capital support ideally, if they're a good foundation, they do. They provide you with connections and strategic partnerships and mentorship for the organization. But I think Ashoka at Going Green, there's a few fellowships that try to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But does Ashoka have like affiliates in different cities?
I'm not sure about affiliates, but they do have branches in different cities, I think. I'll have to actually, now that you mention it, I should probably look that up.
Yeah, I haven't been part of Ashoka, so
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. But like, what's great about foundations is they're usually local,
Mm-hmm.
right? So when you're having like a question or you need a partnership or something like that, you can go to your foundation and their reach is pretty large.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, sorry.
No, so I know Ashoka has, they have organizations all over the world. I think I misunderstood your question. I don't know if they have other places around the United States, is my thing.
Oh, okay.
But they do definitely have, like, all over the world. I know they have one in the Philippines as well, and in India, for example, and I can't give you all of the places off the top of my head, but yeah.
Sorry, there was like
No worries.
Something's falling on my car, like really loud, so I'm moving. Okay. But I wish it's, honestly, like, I don't know enough about Ashoka, and maybe they're doing these things, so I don't want to, like, say, kind of say something that they may already do. But if there were more organizations like Ashoka, like Echoing Green, that want you to have a certain level of traction, but then once you're into the fellowship, but the thing is, there's hardly any of these fellowships, Echoing Green and Ashoka, so, like, the acceptance rate is, like, so small, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think I'll probably apply to Ashoka after we launch our new platform. But with Echoing Green, the first time I applied, we didn't get in. The second time, now we're one of the semifinalists. But it's just kind of like, because there's not that many of them.
Yeah.
It's like getting into Harvard. It's like it's like even harder. It's like 2% acceptance rate or something, 5%. So it's pretty difficult. I feel like to. Like, if there were just more of them, and, like, there's this organization, and this is what I was really disappointed about. There was an organization called Camelback Ventures. I don't know, have you heard of it?
It sounds familiar, but I'm probably not so familiar with it.
Yeah, you can, Camelback Ventures is, I think it's only to the United States, and it's a fellowship specifically for people of color who are social entrepreneurs. It's kind of like Ashoka, but I think it's just the United States. And we just, like, about a week ago, we didn't get in, and their specific reason was we are too far along, and we have too much traction. So I was like, what? So I felt like I was a little mad because I was like, we're getting penalized for having too much traction. Yeah. Because we hardly have any money. Like, literally, our 990 in 2017, like, our fiscal year ended June 30th, was, like, our cash donations was, like, $30,000. I mean, we had over $500,000 worth of pro bono services and pro bono volunteer and pro bono, like, Google AdWords gave us, like, a lot of money and stuff, but we have zero paid staff. Like, we do all of our stuff. We serve 500,000 students with zero paid staff. That's not a sustainable model. Like, I mean, I'm lucky that I can take off a year with no pay, but it's I was so shocked that, like, they thought we had a lot of traction. I was like, I felt like I needed you guys, to, like, really kind of help us connect with connections and stuff, but they said it was too much traction, so I felt like that was weird. That was a little weird. That was the reasoning, Yeah. The reasoning was, like, you didn't have enough traction. That's what I usually think that it is. But actually, the foundation world in LA, that was actually a reason for not getting many grants. They said we were too far along, that we were too scalable, that we served too many kids, and that we won't need them or something in the future. It was weird. So our organization is actually kind of weird. We're like in the middle. We're like too small for Bill and Melinda Gates and the big, huge foundations, like, and the big funders. We don't have enough traction for those, but then we're too big for the small community-based nonprofits. So I don't know. Look up Camelback. But I'm figuring it out. Like, when there's a will, there's a way. That's what I believe. You gotta just be creative.
Usually, how it is, I think.
Yeah.
I can definitely tell you that's how I feel with grad school as well, because going to grad school in the United States, it's really, if there's a will, there's a way,
Yeah.
So
yeah, definitely.
I feel that. So actually, I think we managed to go through all of my questions, which is great because we have 6 minutes left. But I guess